Hey guys, welcome back to Laurence McKenna on LFC channel, where I've just made it back from Wembley. Obviously a disappointing result, and credit to Newcastle on the day. I thought Newcastle bought that perfect game plan, which undermined what Liverpool do and maximised what Newcastle are capable of. And if you're in a cup final, if you've got, that's, like you were saying, that was their World Cup, that's their biggest point in the season, that's their biggest point in recent history. I think that played a part in it, but I don't want to take away from Newcastle. I think Newcastle deserve credit. And one thing I'll definitely start off with is the incredible support of the Newcastle fans today. I was at Wembley, obviously. I was kind of a bit more towards the Newcastle end. And I've got to admit, normally I'm very impressed by Liverpool away support, but Newcastle support was genuinely brilliant. Apart from booing "You'll Never Walk Alone," which was a slightly unusual one, but I guess they want to make everyone as uncomfortable as possible and want to minimize the impact of it. The rest of it I like. I really enjoyed the atmosphere that they created. And broadly, I think actually at the moment, Liverpool fans are hurting, or Liverpool fans are kind of a little bit flatter. And I'll get into that in a little while as to why we're possibly feeling a little bit flatter, why we're possibly a little distracted, why we've possibly got our eyes elsewhere, not only on the Premier League, but also on next season as well, and why that might be taking away a little bit from the season that we are currently having and some of the enjoyment of some of these players, but also the season we're having. So I wanted to caveat all of that with saying congratulations to Newcastle. Big trophy. It's kind of upsetting it came against us in a way, because you don't want to be that team that everyone always remembers getting beaten, but it kind of is what it is. And I appreciate what Newcastle did today. So I've got to say, again, congratulations to Eddie Howe. As much as he's not my favourite manager, I think he came up with a fantastic game plan. And people are speaking here as if the game plan is playing Liverpool at their peak. And I kind of want to address that just for a second, because Arne Slot looked relatively frustrated after the game, but I also think that he acknowledged what Newcastle had done well. And I think there were, throughout the game, frustrating moments for the Liverpool faithful, the Liverpool fans who travelled, because they knew that there were elements of this team that would be second best, or would be second best, and still pulling out of tackles anyway, because there is an eye elsewhere on the, let's be honest, the Premier League. Liverpool want the Premier League. That's all we're really focused on this season. It's all that we really feel is... It's the thing we wanted. We wanted to go equal with Manchester United. We wanted to get just another trophy which feels of significance in the cabinet. And it's why Liverpool players weren't, I think, 100% at this game. Newcastle were the first at every ball. They really played it well, as in they were physical with Liverpool, which Liverpool obviously hate. Every team hates it, but in particular, I think Liverpool sometimes struggle with the physicality of the game. They threw themselves into a lot of tackles. The referee didn't call a couple that I thought probably should have gone our way, and called a few that maybe I thought felt like equaling Newcastle. But, again, it's one of those games, cup final. There are times where it feels as if the referee is almost manually trying to level out the game and make it like a level playing field. But, hey, here we are, right? And I think at the same time, they were also really good at time wasting towards the end of the game. And Liverpool's momentum that they were trying to get up was something that Newcastle would just never let them settle on, never let them make, never let them put themselves in that position. And that really frustrated me, obviously, as a Liverpool fan. There were multiple times where we were getting into the game and suddenly a Newcastle player's going down, or even we scored the goal in 94 minutes, right? Immediately after that, even though it's a blatant onside, even though it's the most obvious onside for Federico Chiesa, he looks confused. We go through about a 2 or 3 minute VAR check. And I've just got to admit, maybe, obviously, if we hadn't had VAR, then the goal wouldn't have stood in the first place, right? Because Liverpool would have just had that ruled offside, frustratingly, and we probably would have seen in the replay, hey, it was onside. It's not really the point I'm trying to make, though. The point is, a very simple decision that could have been reached very quickly with semi-automated onside or offside, and also just completely automated onside and offside, which would have made everything a lot quicker, wouldn't have taken away from Liverpool's momentum, and possibly would have offered them about, 8 minutes? So 4 minutes, roughly 5 minutes possibly, probably more like 3 minutes to do something more. And, I'm not saying I think Liverpool would have done anything in that time. I think broadly Newcastle defended very well. And when I say defended well, I mean they defended well in a bespoke manner towards what Liverpool were doing. They targeted Salah, they isolated Jota, and Diaz was just all at sea out on the left-hand side. When we saw the manager switch it up, when we brought the 4 on up front, when Curtis Jones was there to give a little bit more control in that key area, in the danger zone, as so many managers call it, the game changed. And I think Newcastle were very much trying to counter-attack. But broadly, I think Liverpool will be frustrated by the fact they never really got control in this game. They never really, despite the fact they had more possession, despite the fact they had more passes, Newcastle were excellent at controlling the game off the ball. And in many ways, like with the game that we had at Newcastle just a couple of weeks ago, was a complete red herring of a game against this Newcastle side because they didn't play with Alexander Isak. Andre Isak. And the frustration, I think, on Liverpool's side will be what the key that I want to get across in this video is we found the limits, I think, of this squad now. We find the limits of what this team are currently capable of with injuries, with burnout, because we played a lot of players who got the slot system. And broadly, if you have maybe a preseason with a couple more players who seem a bit more suited to slot, in many ways, the people talking about overachievement for this Liverpool side, they're correct. But at the same time, the contrasting view to that is that Liverpool have done well because of the good coaching of Arne Slot, and I don't want to take away from that. I think that deserves credit. So, it goes both ways, is I guess what I'm trying to say. We've had a good season in the Premier League. We've had a good season in the Champions League, and if it wasn't for if it wasn't for the knockout in penalties, we'd probably be we'd be in a good space right now. But that's not the point. The point is they are out of the Champions League because they didn't play up against PSG. They are out of the Carabao Cup, having not won it because Newcastle played up on the day. I think that's for different reasons than the one that PSG played with. Though, again, I think there'll probably be some broad notes between the two, that you want to focus on the fullbacks. You want to go out to go back in. You want to put pressure between the two Liverpool centre-backs into the channels and into that central channel. And broadly, there are a lot of weaknesses at the moment because of two positions that Liverpool feel particularly weak on. One is right back, the other is left back, but I'm going to say full back, and the other is striker. And I think those are the points where we were let down. And people having a go at Mo Salah, I think I would say it's slightly off the mark. A lot of people say he didn't turn up in those big games, all those kind of things. I think that's a valid idea. But if Mo doesn't have much support up front, if Mo is on the edge of the box and they know that he's pretty much running into dead space and he's only going to be able to do something individually on his own without putting a great cross in, then that makes it a lot easier to shut Mo Salah down. That makes it a lot easier to negate Liverpool's strengths. And I don't think that Jota is playing at his best right now. I think Diaz looked extremely frustrated in the same way Salah did. They were very isolated out on the wings. The eights didn't really help them at all. The fullbacks in Andy Robertson, I don't think he didn't have the legs in this final, and nor did Jarell Quansah. And the people talking about, if we get Trent back, Trent's a huge amount of the creativity. I just think if you had two solid right backs or left backs in there, so a right back and left back, you'd be much more comfortable with the way that Liverpool play, because you would have people who, first of all, are capable, and so their pace and their technical attributes are solid. And I'd rather almost have solid players than players where every now and again we get a great performance, and then every now and again we get a performance which really, they're not bad, but we see them exploited, if that makes sense. And being exploited and being bad are two different things. You can have a decent game, but have your weaknesses exploited. And you can also have a bad game and not have your weaknesses exploited. And there are times, I think, where people have spoken about Liverpool getting away with it, those kind of things, because broadly the centre-backs have played very well. Now, obviously, later on in the game, Konate came off. That's probably due to fitness rather than anything else. And on came Curtis Jones. And during the game, I was saying this, we need to get a foot on the ball. We need to control that area just outside the penalty area, because the second that we do that, we're going to bring so many more aspects into the game. And we started to play what I would identify as a similar game to the one that we played against Brentford when we came back from, it was 0-0, but, we needed the win. And we scored 2 goals pretty late. And we were essentially force-feeding that central channel from the sides, but also just trying to go through the middle and essentially get a striker his shots off. It all relied on the timing of the striker, us winning the ball back, catching them on the hop, and basically putting them in a position where we were artificially creating chances by baiting them into playing the way that we wanted them to play. And late on, Newcastle were tired. They were no longer going long. This season in the Premier League, the average for them, long ball has been 9%. Today they played it 27%, showing that there is, or 25%, showing that there is a game plan there in place by Eddie Howe and the team, which worked, by the way, and isolated our fullbacks. I don't really think it exploited the centre backs. Obviously, it split the centre backs, but I don't really think it exploited them. It got them away from there. It got him away from that danger zone, and maybe you could credit the second goal with kind of, breaking away from those centre backs. But broadly, we knew what the plan was, and I think Arne Slot knew what the plan was. And he was frustrated with the fact that he couldn't field the personnel that he needed to field or wanted to field. Andy Robertson is a great player, but I think at this point in his career, he can't play week in, week out. He can't play the number of minutes that we need him to play. He can't play the intensity that we need him to play. And even though he's brilliant technically, Liverpool really do need a new starting left back. I'd be very happy to keep Andy in the squad, but broadly, we can't rely on a consistent level of high performance that we used to be able to rely on week in, week out with Andy. And, that sounds horrible to say. It sounds actually it sounds quite patronizing in a way, but I don't mean to sound that way. I don't mean to demean him in that sense. I love Andy Robertson. I think he's probably one of our greatest left backs ever. And we've had a lot of good left backs. But that was one of the worst finals I've been to, and it's probably one of the worst finals I've seen in living memory for Liverpool, even though we've had some bad finals. The West Ham one was obviously bad, the Champions League was obviously bad in 2005. There have been plenty where we haven't really turned up in that first half. But this, again, goes with that we didn't really turn up in that first half, and Newcastle really turned up and put the pressure on us. And I've got to admit, I don't think they made the best of that pressure that they put on us. I don't feel that Kelleher was ever really tested, to within an inch of his life. There are a couple of times where he made very close saves, and there are a couple of times where they could have bundled the ball in, but I didn't ever really feel like he was tested where it was like, oh my God, thank God for Kelleher, Broadly, they worked the ball well, and I think here's another thing I want to highlight. We dawdle on the ball at the moment. We kind of fudge it a little bit back in defence, and it's led to a lot of goals more recently. Dan Burn one was a clear header, but I even think then you could probably lead to like that just being, we should have been sharper. Dan Burn is obviously one of their biggest threats on corners. You're not paying attention if you let Dan Burn score from a corner, even though Dan Burn's massive and all those kind of things, right? Very happy for him that he won. I think he won man of the match in the game. He kind of deserved that because of the job he did on Salah and obviously the goal he scored. But we dawdle on the ball. It led to a goal against Southampton. It led to a silly goal against PSG, which was the Dembele goal, which gave them the first goal in that away tie. And we dawdled on the ball for the second one, where it was sort of like we looked indecisive. And earlier on in the season, Liverpool were making great decisions. We were being a very decisive side, and it was really playing to our strengths. It was really playing into what we were good at. We looked very sure on the ball. I think as the season has gone on, the team have kind of undermined their own confidence. There are certain players in there who are still very confident in their ability, but they've started to second guess the system a little bit. And there are certain players in there who very much fit the system, but have started to second guess their ability, i.e. Diego Jota, right? Jota even said a couple of weeks ago, I am not playing at my best right now. I need to regain my best. And Nunez is definitely not playing at his best right now. With a competent striker, and I even just mean competent striker up there who's fit, I think this game is very different for Liverpool. Salah's got someone to aim for and to play off. Newcastle have someone to focus on outside of Salah. And broadly, the team structure is going to look very different. Now, I know that obviously they went around the press, but the second they've done that, I don't understand why we're not then looking at it and going, well, bring on Darwin, or as I said, bring on Curtis Jones. Don't try to press them, but try to pressure them into making poor long balls, which a few times we did, like Curtis Jones and Szoboszlai would be good at through the middle, split the pitch, push them into the corner, make them play it out, and put them in a position where they're uncomfortable. Because we didn't make them look uncomfortable enough. And a big part of the reason they weren't uncomfortable was because, first of all, they were very big, they're very physical, they were more than willing to throw themselves into tackles because Liverpool weren't, and it made it a lot easier for them to win those tackles, the 50-50, so to speak. But then the other flip side of that was we've been really bad at clearing headers recently and then regaining the ball in midfield because we don't currently have a striker 10 combination which has got the spacing right, which has got the movement right, which has got the ability to be the mobility that we need. That's frustrating because we need that. That is what Arne Slot's system is massive on that, clearly, because we're not regaining the ball. And second balls used to be our bread and butter, not only under Klopp, but also under Slot as well. And we were the first to all of them. We were dominating the midfield, we were controlling the game, and we just weren't doing that against Newcastle. And we were allowing them to do that because we weren't regaining that. They were putting a lot through the middle there. They were plugging that up and they're making it really difficult. The moments where we did manage to turn them, we looked great. We were running into space. We were taking them by surprise. We had them on the hop. We had them on the back foot at times. And then they were very good at breaking up our rhythm and not allowing us to play the game that we wanted to play by going down very easily, which is a very big Eddie Howe trait in the first place. But also the referee, I think, today allowed them to get away with quite a lot of time wasting on the ball. And I know that that's every team's plan, but Newcastle in particular just becomes very noticeable after a while when they're trying to level the playing field. And, I know it was by any means necessary today, so I can't really resent them for that. I can't really criticize that. But again, if we aren't putting the pressure on them, if we're playing into that idea of slowing the game down, of all these kind of things, it doesn't really ever allow us to get into a rhythm, as Slot said. And I think Liverpool just weren't allowed to get into their rhythm today. multiple great individual performances on Newcastle's side and probably some of the best performances of the season, but also some of Liverpool's worst performances individually on their side, partially by the Newcastle players, like kind of levelling the playing field, but also because some of these guys look tired. I think we need a slightly deeper squad. What we need in the summer is this: new left back to start, new right back, because we cannot keep having those injuries, guys. We need one more central midfielder, and I think this summer we'll have to go for one more attacking player and then rotate the rest of them, probably moving Darwin Nunez on, possibly even moving on Diaz. But if we can have one reliable striker or semi-reliable striker that plays for you, say, 80 to 90% of the games a season, we can change games in a way that we can't currently change games. And like I said, we were trying to change games through tactics rather than the individual brilliance. And in the end, it was the individual brilliance of Harvey Elliott and Federico Chiesa, two fairly fringe players this season, but showing that it's not necessarily down to the individual brilliance of a player or them fitting a slot system. It's about them understanding what it is they need to do, going above and beyond, having the energy to execute that and growing into the game. The players that Liverpool have got out on the field when they start, the problem is at the moment they're exhausted. Gravenberch looks exhausted. McAllister looks so tired, which is part of the reason that we've kept identifying him for a transfer, because he gets very tired very quickly. Same goes for Szoboszlai. He looks exhausted, but that's because he run his legs off. And when Curtis Jones came on, I love the support he offers to all the people around him. I'd love to see more of Curtis Jones controlling games in games to come. And that's kind of my final point here. Right back, we're talking about Trent so much. I get that he's a lot of the creativity, but why don't we put another creative player there? I'm not saying I know better than a slot. He knows better than me by a very long way. But if we were to put a Curtis Jones, if we were to put someone else in there, I think we've got a foot on the ball. We've got distribution. I know the tackling changes maybe a little bit, but that's kind of not the point. And, at times, I think a lot of people underestimate Trent's tackling. So, I know we missed that. But I think broadly we can make up for it almost better than we can with Quansah and the movement. People are talking about, Newcastle beat them in all areas today. Liverpool's fullbacks and them needing to be covered for by the midfield led to us just compromising so many parts of our system. And when we did go up to the top, there was no support for them because we were compromising our system at the back. And we didn't have to compromise in that same way at the start of the season because we had everyone fit, we have everyone in a good position. And as the season goes on, obviously we've had to compromise on elements of that. And I think if we had new/fit players, we wouldn't be in that position against Newcastle today. And we possibly wouldn't have been in that position against PSG either. I think it would have been a lot more level in both games because fullback-wise, we would have had just aggressive, 100% fit, or at least 80, 90% fit players. Yeah, that's broadly where I'm at. I think it's shown how far we've stretched the team, how far we've brought the team. But we can't go into next season with the same squad. And broadly, I think we know we won't, right? I think there are some key positions that will change this summer. And the problem is at the moment, I think we're slightly ahead of ourselves in thinking the league title is won. It's certainly not. In thinking that certain players can leave, they certainly can't, not just yet. And in maybe underestimating the size of the task that is still to go this season. Losing the League Cup, losing the Champions League, I think are fairly big psychological barriers for these guys and could, to an extent, I think, show themselves in games to come where it's sort of like, oh, did we that? That's been a bit of an ego knock to some of these guys. So I just want to make sure that we get back on track. The next game post-international break is Everton on the 2nd of April. Jeez, right? We've got a while to prep for it. Broadly, I think a lot of players will, I think we need, I don't want to see any injuries. I don't want to see people needlessly going away their international team this time. We got a title to win. If you're just playing friendlies, I don't want to see it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Frustrating game, very obviously frustrating game. But I think it's all explicable and it's all reasonable to say that these things are things that Arne Slot already knew. And I think that's fine. I don't feel as bad because it was against the Newcastle side. I will kick back slightly against the fairy tale thing because of the owners. But apart from that, credit to Newcastle. They really deserve. And if anyone deserves it, it's those fans. Incredible fans. Wembley was absolutely incredible today because of the Newcastle fans. Liverpool, I think we're a little bit jaded at the moment. And we need to move away from that funk. It's a bad result pre-international break, but it gives us some time to process it, time to take stock, kick on in the rest of the season, and try and get those points in the bag that now we just have that focus on. I will be back tomorrow to talk to you guys a little bit more about Liverpool. In the meantime, I appreciate you. I'll chat to you later. Much love.